Right now, like 60% of enterprise organizations are actively evaluating or, building artificial intelligence systems.
Yeah, they're pouring massive budgets into it.
Exactly. But behind those flashy boardroom demos, where you see these slick generative AI agents summarizing spreadsheets in 3 seconds,
Yeah.
there's a brutal
That's
reality
a very brutal one.
because 95% of these projects are going to crash and burn before they ever make a measurable impact on the bottom line. So if you're sitting in strategy meetings watching these demos, you are likely witnessing a mass hallucination of success.
I mean, the disconnect between the laboratory environment and real-world deployment it's never been wider.
Yeah.
We're seeing organizations spend tens of millions of dollars on AI initiatives only to hit a brick wall the very second they try to scale them beyond a controlled pilot program.
Yeah, and we've got our hands on some fascinating 2025 research from MIT Project Nanda. It's titled, Why 95% of Enterprise AI Projects Fail and What Leaders Must Do Instead. And the numbers they report are just, they're sobering.
They really are.
As I mentioned, 60% of companies are in that evaluation phase. But of those, only 20% actually manage to reach a functioning pilot stage.
And then you hit the real cliff drop.
Exactly, the cliff. A mere 5% successfully deploy into production with tangible financial outcomes. I mean, that is a 75% failure rate just between a successful pilot and actual production.
It's massive.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Our mission for this deep dive is to figure out the mechanics behind this massive failure rate and, more importantly, decode exactly what the successful 5% are doing to actually make AI work at scale.
Well, the first step is just completely discarding the assumption that these projects fail because the AI simply isn't intelligent enough.
Right, people always blame the AI.
Exactly. The initial reaction is usually to say, oh, the model hallucinated, or it lacked sufficient parameters to understand the data. But the research points to a much deeper structural flaw.
Which is what, exactly?
The fatal issue is the architecture itself. I mean, enterprises are treating AI like an isolated floating brain.
It's a floating brain. I like that.
Yeah, they build this incredibly powerful cognitive engine, but they leave it completely disconnected from the actual operational nervous system of the company.
And treating it like an isolated brain leads right into what the research calls the third-party overlay model, right?
The data lake illusion.
Right. It's the instinct to take all of a company's data, pull it out of its native software, and just dump it into one massive central repository so the AI can read it. And, I mean, on paper, putting everything into a centralized data lake sounds incredibly efficient.
It sounds great, but it is arguably the most pervasive architectural trap in the industry today.
Wow, really?
Oh, yeah. The IT team extracts data from sales, HR, logistics, finance, and funnels it all into this static pool. But the problem is that the second you extract data from a complex operational platform, like an ERP system, you strip away its soul.
You lose the context.
You completely lose the business context.
As I was reading through the source material, a specific image came to mind. It's like taking a highly complex, beautifully functioning V8 car engine completely apart and then throwing every single nut, bolt, piston, and wire into a giant metal bucket.
That's a great way to look at it.
Right. You can point to the bucket and say, look, I have all the components of an engine, but you don't actually have an engine.
No, you just have a bucket of parts.
Exactly. Without the precise structural connections, the timing chains, the spatial relationships, it's just a heavy pile of metal.
That analogy perfectly captures the mechanical failure of the data lake. What's fascinating here is the sheer volume of relational intelligence that gets left behind in that extraction process.
Give me an example of that.
Sure. Take a platform like SAP S/4HANA. When you pull a raw number out of a spreadsheet there and feed it to the AI just sees a value, let's say 100,000.
Okay, just a flat number.
Right. But inside the native ERP system, that number was surrounded by critical context. The system knew that value represented revenue specifically tied to, say, a German subsidiary.
So it knew the currency relationship too.
Exactly, understanding it was in euros, not US dollars. It understood the transactional dependencies. It recognized that this specific invoice only existed because a corresponding purchase order was approved by a regional manager last Tuesday under a specific promotional code.
And it loses the time-dependent business logic, right? Like a rule that applied to a transaction in Q3 might be completely invalid in Q4.
Yes, exactly.
But the raw data in the lake doesn't carry that temporal awareness.
Right. The AI is now staring at a bucket of disconnected numbers, entirely blind to the actual operational story of the business.
So how do you fix that? Do you just remap it?
Trying to manually rebuild all those intricate connections and remap that lost context over in the new AI layer is a logistical nightmare.
I can imagine.
It's insanely expensive, incredibly complex, and because the business environment changes daily, you are constantly trying to map a moving target.
Which brings us to how the successful 5% are bypassing this trap entirely. They're utilizing zero-copy architectures and data fabric models.
Yes, that's the key.
And the core mechanism here is elegant. Instead of moving the data to the AI, you bring the AI to the data.
Precisely. The AI operates through a semantic layer that interfaces directly with the native system.
That's not copying anything.
No, instead of copying the data onto a new server, the zero-copy architecture allows the AI to send a query directly into SAP S/4HANA, read the answer using the system's own embedded logic, and then leave the data exactly where it sits.
Oh, wow.
It preserves the complete semantic integrity of the information.
Because the moment you move data just to make it accessible to a third-party app, you essentially destroy your ability to trust it.
You do.
Like if the AI hallucinated a currency conversion because it lost the ERP context, the resulting board presentation is going to be an absolute disaster.
Trust in enterprise data is absolute. If the context fractures, the trust evaporates instantly.
Right. But fixing the architecture and preserving the context only solves the first half of the equation,
True.
because the MIT research notes that even with pristine data, crossing the chasm from a successful pilot to full-scale production still claims 75% of projects. And I have to, push back a little on the underlying assumption here.
Oh, how so?
Well, if the AI is highly capable and the data is sitting in the right place with all its context perfectly intact, shouldn't deployment be straightforward? Isn't enterprise success ultimately just about giving employees a faster tool to increase their productivity?
That assumes AI is just an advanced calculator, which is a really dangerous misconception.
Okay, why dangerous?
Because the productivity myth leads organizations to measure the wrong outcomes entirely. If we connect this to the bigger picture, moving an AI from a sandbox into a live production environment requires readiness across several specific dimensions.
Dimensions that have nothing to do with the algorithm itself.
Yep. Exactly. It's about how the organization absorbs the technology.
Right. And looking at the framework the research lays out, the friction really starts with learning capability. A pilot project typically relies on a static data set, right? It learns the parameters of the sandbox and then just stops.
Yeah, but a live enterprise environment is highly volatile. Supply chains shift, tax codes update, market dynamics alter.
So a static model is basically useless on day 2.
A static model begins decaying the moment it is deployed. Successful production systems must evolve continuously. They require constant vendor updates and active learning pipelines to ensure the intelligence doesn't become obsolete within, well, a matter of weeks.
But putting that evolving AI into practice creates a secondary hurdle, which is workflow integration and change management.
This is a massive stumbling block.
Because if an employee has to minimize their primary operational dashboard, open a new browser tab, log into a separate AI portal, and then type out a prompt just to get an insight, the friction is too high.
Way too high. The adoption rate will just flatline. The integration must be invisible. The AI has to operate directly inside the familiar software environments where human operators are already making their daily decisions.
Just right there in their normal tools.
Exactly. When you embed the capability naturally into existing workflows, the change management burden nearly vanishes. You aren't forcing the staff to learn a parallel software ecosystem on top of doing your actual jobs.
Then you run into the reality of governance. A sandbox pilot uses anonymized, safe data, but production. That means touching live customer financials, sensitive intellectual property, and heavily regulated information.
And you cannot just bolt security onto an AI system as an afterthought.
It never works.
Never. The compliance rules, access controls, and data masking protocols must be natively inherited from the environment where the AI operates.
And the final dimension they highlight is maintenance. And honestly, this is where I really feel for internal IT departments.
Oh, absolutely.
They are already stretched to their absolute limits, just keeping the lights on. Handing an exhausted IT team a massively complex AI network and expecting them to manually maintain the semantic mapping for a global operation. I mean, that is a recipe for instant burnout.
The maintenance burden cannot fall on the enterprise. It just can't.
So who does it?
The platform providers. The model retraining, the continuous semantic mapping, the underlying infrastructure updates, all of that must be handled by the vendors.
Leaving IT to do what?
The internal IT team should be focused on leveraging the AI for business strategy, not untangling its data knots.
Okay, so when an organization successfully navigates all five of these dimensions, learning, workflow, change management, governance, and maintenance, how do they actually quantify that success? Because you mentioned earlier that the productivity myth is a trap.
Right. The ultimate metric of success is hard financial outcomes, not localized productivity gains.
Okay, meaning what on the balance sheet?
The successful 5% aren't celebrating because an AI drafted an internal memo 10 minutes faster. They are measuring tangible shifts. They are looking at reductions in days sales, outstanding, the actual time it takes to collect revenue after a sale.
Right.
They are tracking measurable improvements in working capital and liquidity.
That makes perfect sense. An enterprise doesn't authorize a massive architectural overhaul just to shave a few minutes off administrative tasks.
Sure.
They do it to optimize cash flow and drive revenue.
Precisely.
And here's where it gets really interesting.
Yeah.
Because once this native architecture is in place and the organization successfully crosses that pilot to production chasm, the very nature of what the AI is capable of doing fundamentally transforms.
It's a complete paradigm shift.
Yeah, the source material describes this evolution as the leap from a chain of thought to a chain of action.
And this represents a profound shift in the utility of artificial intelligence. For the past few years, the first generation of enterprise AI has been almost exclusively focused on thinking.
Just generating ideas.
Right. The model analyzes a data set, synthesizes the information, and generates a recommendation or a summary.
It's essentially an incredibly smart diagnostic tool. It flags a dashboard in red and alerts a human operator to an anomaly, but, the human still has to physically open the software, navigate the menus, and execute the fix.
The human remains the sole executor of the action.
Right.
But next generation enterprise AI operates fundamentally differently. Because the AI is now natively embedded inside the operational systems with full semantic context, it bypasses the mere recommendation phase entirely.
It just does it.
It initiates the corrective workflow directly.
So instead of just pointing out a problem, it actually solves it. Give me a picture of what that looks like in a complex corporate scenario.
Okay, consider an anomaly in a cross-border tax calculation. A first-generation AI simply generates a warning, like a potential tax error detected on European invoice 402.
And then a human has to go dig into it.
Exactly. But a next-generation AI agent, operating on a chain of action, identifies the error, automatically triggers an invoice correction protocol, executes the necessary ledger adjustment, validates the new figures against current regional compliance regulations, and updates the internal financial controls.
All on its own.
Yes! It performs that entire sequence in a fraction of a second.
Okay, I have to stop you there because the immediate reaction of literally any CFO listening to this is going to be sheer terror.
I know.
I mean, the idea of an invisible, autonomous agent diving into the corporate ledgers, altering invoices, and executing financial adjustments on its own sounds like a massive liability.
Yeah.
How does an organization establish enough trust to hand over the keys to the financials without triggering a panic attack from their auditors?
Well, trust is the absolute fulcrum of this entire architecture. You cannot have a black box making unilateral financial changes.
No, obviously not.
So to solve this, modern agentic architectures utilize cryptographically verifiable identities and heavily secured audit trails.
Okay, so cryptographically verifiable identities essentially act as an immutable audit trail. But how does that actually manifest when the AI changes a ledger entry?
Think of every financial record as a highly intricate digital puzzle. When the AI agent takes an action, whether it's adjusting a tax calculation or validating a compliance report, it doesn't just quietly overwrite the data.
What did it do?
It creates a new puzzle piece that perfectly locks into the preceding and following entries on the digital ledger. That piece carries a unique, unbreakable mathematical signature.
Oh, wow.
It records the exact timestamp, the specific nature of the change, and crucially, the precise business logic the AI used to arrive at that decision.
It's a mathematically certain paper trail. So if someone or something tries to retroactively alter even a single digit, the puzzle pieces no longer fit, and the entire system instantly rejects the anomaly.
Exactly. Every single microaction is deeply traceable, verifiable, and explainable. When a regulator audits the system, the enterprise doesn't just shrug and say the algorithm handled it.
They have proof.
They provide a flawless cryptographic map of the AI's execution logic. The philosophy here is critical. Automation must not reduce accountability. It must fundamentally strengthen it.
It's not just doing the work, it's aggressively showing its work. And that mechanism is what allows this technology to scale up to the final concept outlined in the research, the Internet of Agents.
Yes, the scaling is where it gets wild.
Because we've been talking about a single AI correcting an invoice, but the future state they describe involves entire ecosystems of these agents.
The era of the single monolithic AI system, the giant centralized brain trying to do everything for everyone is rapidly ending.
It's just too big.
It is simply too clumsy, too slow, and it carries way too much systemic risk. We are moving toward a distributed model where specialized AI agents collaborate across the enterprise network.
Like a highly coordinated swarm instead of a single giant entity.
Precisely. In this Internet of Agents, each AI is a master of a very specific narrow domain. Well, you might have one agent entirely dedicated to VAT analysis across different European jurisdictions. A completely separate agent specializes solely in cross-border transaction intelligence.
Oh, I see.
And another focuses entirely on monitoring real-time regulatory changes by scanning global statutory filings.
And because they are connected through standardized communication protocols, they can negotiate complex problems together. Like, if the cross-border agent initiates a transaction, it instantly consults the VAT agent for regional tax implications.
Right.
And simultaneously checks with the regulatory agent to ensure the structure is legally compliant, all before the ledger agent officially records the entry.
And they reach a mathematically verified consensus in milliseconds. It is a network of highly specialized experts working in continuous real-time collaboration.
Okay, so what does this all mean for you, the listener, in the reality of your daily operations? The research translates this complex network into one massive, real-world implication for the workplace: the end of periodic compliance.
A huge deal.
Which has to sound like absolute salvation to anyone who has ever suffered through a grueling quarter-end financial clause.
Oh, definitely. This raises an important question about the fundamental rhythms of corporate finance. Because for decades, financial compliance has followed a deeply stressful retrospective cycle.
Right, looking backward.
Transactions occur all year long. Errors accumulate, anomalies get buried in the noise. Then, at the end of the quarter or the end of the fiscal year, the audits begin.
It's an archaeological dig. Just a frantic scramble to uncover what went wrong 6 months ago and desperately try to patch it before the reporting deadline.
But as digital tax systems evolve globally and real-time reporting mandates become statutory law, that retrospective model is completely breaking down.
It has to.
The future is continuous compliance. When you have a swarm of specialized AI agents monitoring every single transaction in real time, verifying every ledger entry cryptographically the exact moment it happens, your books are never out of balance.
Because the AI agents validate the data the exact millisecond it is created, ensuring that the accounting records and tax reporting remain perfectly consistent at all times.
You are no longer preparing evidence for an audit after the fact. The architecture generates automated, verifiable audit evidence continuously on the fly.
So it's proactive.
Yes. It shifts compliance from being a massive source of operational friction to being a natural, invisible byproduct of simply running your business.
Man, we have covered incredible ground today, diving into why 95% of these projects stall and what the successful 5% are actually executing. Synthesizing all of this, enterprise leaders are staring down a fundamental strategic choice.
They are.
On one side, you have the traditional fragile approach, the third-party overlay. You extract your data into a massive lake, strip away the vital business context, endure years of integration nightmares, and end up with an isolated system that might, speed up an email draft, but utterly fails to move the financial needle.
That path practically guarantees inclusion in the 95% failure rate.
And on the other side, you have the native alternative. You activate the intelligence directly inside your existing operational software. You fiercely protect the semantic richness of your ERP systems.
Exactly.
You deploy specialized agents that operate on a chain of action within familiar workflows, entirely governed by cryptographic trust. This results in continuous compliance and actual measurable financial outcomes like optimized working capital.
It is the difference between bolting an artificial brain onto the outside of an organization versus waking up the operational nervous system from within.
And as you look at your own organization's technology roadmap, remember that this is not some distant theoretical sci-fi scenario.
Hmm.
This architectural shift is actively separating the market leaders from the laggards right now.
Right now, yes.
The only question is which side of the statistics your company will land on. Will you continue building fragile layers on top of your systems, or will you activate the intelligence already living inside them?
It is arguably the defining strategic decision of this decade for enterprise leadership.
It really is. And it leaves me with one final kind of mind-bending thought to leave you with today.
Let's hear it.
If we truly are moving into a reality of continuous compliance, where specialized AI swarms are instantly auditing, correcting, and cryptographically verifying every piece of financial data in real time, does the entire concept of a financial quarter or a year-end close become completely obsolete?
Oh, wow.
Right? If the books are always perfect, perfectly verified up to the exact millisecond, maybe our entire human calendar of doing business is about to permanently change.
A profound possibility to consider as the technology scales.
Something to mull over before your next end-of-month scramble. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.